Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Doomed to suffer unimaginable torture for all eternity, the traitorous high priest of Pharaoh Seti I, Imhotep, is buried alive. Nearly 3 millennia later, in 1926, the intrepid American adventurer Rick O'Connell, the bookish British Egyptologist Evelyn, and her brother Jonathan unwisely embark on a dangerous treasure hunt in the lost city of Hamunaptra, only to inadvertently set free Imhotep. Now the slowly regenerating creature plans his revenge, hell-bent on unleashing 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt and the world, and above all, reunite his eternal lover, Anck-su-namun. Do Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan have what it takes to thwart the ancient entity's evil plans? Can they stop the Mummy? The Mummy, 1999. Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting, awesome, and an incredible episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well, hope you're good, as per usual. As you heard in that wonderful introduction, today we're going to be looking at the 1999 cult classic, dear to my heart, absolute favourite movie of all time, The Mummy. I'm so excited for this one, but before we get into my excitement, before we break this movie down and celebrate its 25th anniversary this year, god damn, I feel old. We've got to do with housekeeping, because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on anything that I am doing, watching, playing, and all that jazz. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, a like and a comment, because that helps me out amazingly. Also, if you listen to this on Spotify and you haven't done so yet, make sure you leave a rating. If you're listening on your phone, you can do it. If you scroll to the top and click the stars, you'll be able to rate from 1 to 5 stars, and it helps me go up the algorithm list. So if you can do all those things before we begin, I'll be eternally grateful. So, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about The Mummy today, and I am, as you can tell, incredibly excited and overjoyed. I can't believe it's been 25 years this year that this movie came out. It's one of them cornerstone movies. It's a movie that really is at the heart of my childhood. It's a film it's probably the movie that I've watched the most ever. Like, no, we all have that one film that we've watched so many times out of all movies. The Mummy is that film, mainly because it's so wildly loved, not just in my house. Like, we have the DVDs, we had it on video, then we had it on DVD. We always watch it in my house, but also in the UK, it is one of the most beloved movies. Like, everybody's seen it. It's always on TV, always on ITV2 or ITV, or sometimes on the BBC. Like, it's just a film that in the summer, winter, no matter what type of day, if you put the TV on, especially on a weekend, you will find the Mummy movies playing. They are just so renowned and so loved by everybody here in the UK that you are bound to have watched it at least once. So it is probably the only film that I've watched so many times, but I never get bored of it. I love it. I love the adventure. Every time I watch it, I just get lost, in the whole mystery of it all and the whole adventure. Like, it's that good of a film. And this is not just rose-tinted glasses. Generally, I've never met a single person who has watched The Mummy who has told me they didn't like it. It's never happened, and I don't think it is a thing. I've met people that didn't think it was the greatest movie in the world, like I do, but even they don't think it's terrible. Even they say it's pretty good, so that's got to say something. And and if it doesn't, I don't know what will. But yeah, today we're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of The Mummy, and I'm just ecstatic. My memories go back so far. Like, this is a film that I quote all the time. It's one of the movies that I just quote line for line, and I love it. Benny, he's still funny. The many times I've seen, Rick and Benny, just like, I know he's going to throw him off the boat, but each time he does it, it's funny. Or when he when he's running through with all the treasure, like like what's going to happen. That he puts it on the lever and Hammer Actress starts to implode. And each time it was like, oh, go on, goodbye, Betty, and like he gets eaten. It's great, or where you have the moments where you've got Jonathan goes, "Do I know you? Oh, I've just got one of them faces," and he socks him in the face. Still funny to this day, and it's just down to the writing and to the story and the setting of it all. It's just one of them timeless movies that you could watch it a million times, and it's like the Titanic. Every time you watch it, you know the boat's going to sink, but you still sit there for the two almost 3 hours of that film because it's such a great story. It pulls you in. It's the same with this movie for me anyway. It's the fact of no matter how many times I've seen it, no matter what I'm doing, I will stop what I'm doing to watch this film. And I love it. It's great during a Sunday lunch when you're having like your roast dinner. Fantastic. It's great when it's raining. When it's sunny outside, I would happily sit and watch The Mummy. It's just always good. It's never one of them films of like, oh God, the Mummy's on again. It's like, oh yeah, the Mum's on again. Let's do it. I've already seen it like 20,000 times this year already, but what happened another 20,001 times? You know what I mean? So I just love this movie. I do. I'm absolutely overjoyed to talk about it. It's been on my list for ages, and I've been putting it off, and I always wondered to myself, why do I keep putting The Mummy off? And now I know it's the 25th anniversary. I'm going to celebrate it today. So, the cast. Obviously, we know who the cast is, but let's go through it anyway. So, the cast are one-time Oscar winner Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, the absolutely gorgeous and beautiful Rachel Weisz as Evelyn, John Hannah as Jonathan. He's also quite funny. He does a lot of serious roles now, but in his younger days he did a lot of comedy. Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep, Kevin J. O'Connor as Benny, Jonathan Hayne as Dr. Alan Chamberlain, Odin Fair as Ardette Bay, Eric Avi as Dr. Terence Bay, Stephen Durham as Mr. Henderson, Corey Johnson as Mr. Daniels, Tuck Walkins as Mr. Burns, Omid Dali as Warden Gad Hassan, and Aaron Epel as Pharaoh Seti the First. It's such a great cast, such a stat cast. It's such a 90s cast as well. Brendan Fraser in his prime. I'm a huge Brendan Fraser fan. I am. I've been a fan of him since I watched like School Ties. If you haven't seen School Ties, epic, fantastic movie. So heartbreaking, but such a great story. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I haven't seen The Whale yet. The Whale's still on my list. The only reason I haven't seen it is because I know it's going to make me cry, and I haven't really been in the mood as of late to really watch a movie. Well, I haven't really been in the mood to cry as of late because I've been too busy, and I don't really feel like crying at the moment. So I haven't gotten around to watching that film yet, but it's on the list. But it's such a stacked cast, such an incredible cast. Everybody does a fantastic job. Even the side characters, like the men that get killed by Imhotep, like Mr. Henderson, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Burns, all these guys. Even these side characters all do a fantastic job, and I absolutely adore. I adore this movie. I have so many friends that joke to me like this whole cast was their like sexual awakening, which I can understand. I completely get. We all fell in love with Rachel Weisz. We all fell in love with Brendan Fraser. They were just gorgeous. The whole cast is just stunning, as well as being incredibly talented, so I completely understand where people are coming from there. But the production, so a lot went into the production of these movies, right? A lot went in. And usually I would slim it down, but because it's the 25th anniversary, there's quite a bit I want to talk about, so we're just going to get straight into it, right? So in the late 1980s, the producers, James Jacks and Sean Daniel, decided to update the original 1932 Mummy film for the modern era. Universal gave them the go-ahead, but only if they kept the budget around $10 million. Jack remembers that the studio essentially wanted a low-budget horror franchise. In 1987, George A. Romero wrote a film treatment and was attached to direct. Screenwriter Abby Bernstein recalled that Universal wanted an unstoppable mummy akin to the Terminator. Bernstein's story took place in the present. Scientists inadvertently bring a mummy back to life who wants to use an ancient device to destroy all life on Earth. The mummy had no more social interaction than the Tyrannosaurus did in Jurassic Park, Bernstein recalled. Romero drifted away from the project and the script was abandoned. Next, Jack and Daniel recruited horror filmmaker-writer Clive Barker to direct after his success with Hellraiser. Barker's 1990 treatment and a successive 1991 screenplay by Mick Garris were dark and violent, with a story revolving around an art museum that rebuilds an entire Egyptian tomb in Beverly Hills. Jack recalls that Baker's take was dark, sexual, and filled with mysticism, and that it would have been a great low-budget movie. Baker recalled the concept was too weird for the studio and that his vision treated the mummy as a jumping-off point for the film instead of the central character. The studio considered the film being too perverted to be made. Alan Ormsby, unaware of previous efforts to launch the film, was brought on next. He pitched a more straightforward, up-to-date a 1932 film, again focusing on the mummy as a relentless Terminator-like character. Joe Dante was attached as director, increasing the budget for his idea of Daniel Day-Lewis as the brooding mummy. This version draft was later rewritten by John Sayles. It was set in contemporary times and focused on reincarnation with elements of a love story. It came close to being made, with some elements like the flesh-eating scarabs making it to the final product, but Universal baked at the higher price tag. Romero returned to the project 7 years later in 1994 with a vision of a zombie-style horror film similar to Night of the Living Dead, but which also relied heavily upon elements of tragic romance and ambience of identity. Romero completed a draft in October 1994, co-written by Ormsby and Sayles, that revolved around a female archaeologist named Helen Grover and her discovery of the tomb of Imhotep, an Egyptian general who lived in the time of Ramses II. Unfolding in a nameless American city in modern times, events are set into motion with Imhotep inadvertently awakens as a result of his body having been exposed to rays from an MRI scan in a high-tech forensic archaeology lab. Helen finds herself drawn into a tentative relationship with Imhotep while also experiencing clairvoyant flashbacks to a previous life in 19th dynasty of Egypt as Princess Isis. Summoning mystical powers through incarnation, Imhotep later resurrects the mummy of Karas, a loyal slave. Karas embarks on a vengeful rampage against the grave robbers of his tomb. Romero's script was considered too dark and too violent by Jacks and the studio, who wanted a more accessible picture. Romero was unable to exterminate himself from another contract he had in negotiation with MGM, and so his involvement with the film was severed and the development of an entirely new script was commissioned. Garris returned in 1995, developing a script that combined elements of the 1932 film and the 1942's The Mummy Tomb. This draft was a period piece, awash in Egyptian art-inspired Art Deco, but the vision once again proved too expensive for the studio and was discarded for a modern setting. While the project came close to entering production, Universal sold to Seagram. Sheenberg chose to produce The Mummy through his independent company and write a new script. Unable to find a suitable high-profile writer and director, Wes Craven was offered, but he turned it down. The project unraveled again, and Garris left the project for the second time. Still determined to create a new mummy film, Universal hired Kevin Geary in 1996 to write a new screenplay. According to Jacks, the executives were now convinced that the film should be a larger budget period piece. Stephen Summers called Jacks and Daniel in 1997 with his vision of the mummy as a kind of Indiana Jones or Jason the Argonauts, with the mummy as the creature giving the hero a hard time. Summers had seen the original film when he was 8 and wanted to recreate the things he liked about it on a bigger scale. Discussing other classic horror characters, Summers recalls that Frankenstein made him sad. I always felt sorry for him. Dracula was kind of cool and sexy, but the mummy just plain scared me. He had wanted to make a mummy film, but other writers or directors were always attached. After the box office disappointment of Bay, Pig in the City, among others, Universal needed a hit film. At the time, Universal's management had changed in response to the box office failures, and the losses led to the studio to revisit its successful franchises from the 1930s. New chair Stacey Snider disrupted Packett's detailing the studio's holdings, including nearly 5,000 old scripts and films. Summers received his window of opportunity and pitched his Mummy to Universal with an 18-page treatment. Summers did not want to remake the original film. Instead of making another straightforward horror film, he wanted to turn it into a romantic action-adventure epic with a few horror elements. Consensus of how the shambling, bandaged mummy of the old film had become something of a punchline. He wanted a faster, meaner, and scarier monster. Summers incorporated his own research and the services of the UCLA archaeology professor to make the ancient Egyptian language accurate. Snyder recalled that Summers' treatment was unique in that it took place in the 1920s rather than a contemporary setting. Universal liked the treatment so much that they approved the concept and increased the budget, as Summers spent a year working on the screenplay. So, that is the development. As for casting's a lot shorter, but I need a quick drink of water. 1 second. Right, so, casting. Jax offered the role of Rick O'Connell to Tom Cruise, who was later cast in the reboot film. Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck were also considered, but the actors were not interested or could not fit the role into their respective schedules. Jax and Summers were impressed with George of the Jungle's box office earnings and the cast of Brendan Fraser as a result. Summers also commented that he felt Fraser fit the Errol Flynn swashbuckling character he had envisioned for Rick perfectly. Fraser's return in George bolstered his perspective star power, yet he remained far cheaper than the biggest actors working. The actor understood that his character doesn't take himself too seriously, otherwise the audience can't go on that journey with him. Evelyn was named in tribute to Lady Evelyn Herbert, the daughter of amateur archaeologist Lord Cavenon, both present at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. The studio originally considered American actress Rachel Weisz, had auditioned multiple times before getting the part. Weisz was not a big fan of horror films, but saw the movie as more of a hokum comic book. John Hannah was picked for the role of Jonathan, despite the fact that Hannah felt he was not a comedic actor, with some saying that he had no idea why we cast him. Jax had previously produced Hard Time, and Harold Verhoeven, the South African actor, liked the Mummy script but told Summers he wanted to play the role absolutely straight. From Imhotep's point of view, this is a skewed vision of Romeo and Juliet. He was offered the role after a single audition, carrying some extra weight and conscious of it being of Imhotep's skimpy costume. Verhoeven lost 10 to 15 pounds for the role by eschewing alcohol and sugar. All right, fair enough. As for the filming, principal photography began on May the 4th, 1998, and lasted 17 weeks. The crew was unable to shoot in Egypt due to unstable political conditions, so filming began in Marrakesh, Morocco. Marrakesh had the extra advantage of being much less modern than Cairo, making it easy to dress it up like the 1920s. The production set 2 weeks before filming, taking down telephone pole wires and cables and shipping in period cars and camels. Locals served as extras for crowd scenes. After shooting in Marrakesh, filming moved to Sahara Desert outside the small town of Hereford. Production designer Alan Cameron found a geologic feature, Gara Midor, I feel like I'm butchering that name. If I am, I apologise, where the exteriors for Hamanatra could be constructed. A concrete ramp was built to allow access into the horseshoe-shaped formation, where the city was built from prefabricated parts shipped from England. A survey of the area was conducted so that an accurate model and scale models of the columns and statues could be replicated back at Shepperton Studios, where all the stages involving the underground passages of the Dead City were shot. These sets took 18 weeks to build and included fiberglass columns rigged with special effects for the movie's final scenes. To avoid dehydration in the scorching heat of Sahara, the production's medical team created a drink that the cast and crew had to consume every 2 hours. Sandstorms were daily inconveniences and wildlife were a major problem, with many crew members having to be airlifted to medical care after being bitten or stung. Fraser nearly died during a scene where his character is hanged. The production had the official support of the Royal Moroccan Army, and the cast members had kidnapping insurance taken out on them. After shooting in North Africa, production moved back to United Kingdom before completion on August the 29th, 1998. Here, the dockyards at Chatham doubled for the Gaza port on the Nile River. This set was 600 feet, 183 meters in length, and featured a stern steam train, an Ajax traction engine, 3 cranes, and an open 2-horse carriage, 4 horse-drawn carts, 5 dressing horses and grooms, 9 pack donkeys and a mule, as well as market stalls, Arab club vendors, and room for 300 costumed extras. Right, one more. Special effects. This part is really, really important. Right. So, the filmmakers reportedly spent $50 million of the budget on special effects alone. The Mummy features hundreds of shots that required optical or digital special effects in post-production. Effects house Industrial Light and Magic (ILM) contributed more than 140 shots, with additional work done by Cinesight 60 shots and Pacific Tile and Mirage 45 shots, and the film's title sequence. Summers engaged Industrial Light and Magic while still developing the script, having previously worked with Industrial Light and Magic effects supervisor John Andrew Burton Jr. on Deep Rising. Industrial Light and Magic was eager for the challenge the film provided and produced a proof of concept for the Mummy's effects in late 1997 to demonstrate the feasibility of Summers' vision that he wanted to execute. The filmmakers sought to make something faster and scary for the title creature, using cutting-edge techniques to create something never before seen. Industrial Light and Magic started developing the look of the Mummy 3 months before filming started. We wanted to create a photorealistic corpse that was obviously not a man in a suit, obviously not an animatronic, and obviously alive, he recalled. Over a months-long period, the designers worked on developing 4 distinct stages for the Mummy. Stage 1 was the Mummy as its most decayed, with tattered bits of clothing, skin, and sewings hanging over the skeleton. Stage 2 added areas of regenerated skin, with Stage 3 and 4 having the Mummy almost fully regenerated, with only small areas of his innards showing through. The artist developed black and white sketches, then moved on to colour treatments before building the creature in the computer. Models were also made to use as reference for the digital artists. The initial stages of the Mummy were created entirely by computer, while later stages combined live action performance to supplement prosthetics and makeups applied on set. LED lights and pieces of tape served as tracking points so that digital cutouts could be applied to Vaslu's face and body in pre-production. Vaslu remarked that walking around the set he felt like a Christmas tree. The final creature was created with a combination of live action acting with prosthetics and digital imagery. A digital representation of the Mummy was created in Alias, featuring simulated muscles for much of the body attached to a skeleton. The animators control parts of the Mummy via procedural animation, animating the underlying bones, in turn controlled the stretch and movement of the overlaid muscles. Finally, laid on top of the procedural animation and motion capture was additional animation to tweak the performance. Given the limitations of the technology, subtle movements like facial or hand animations had to be done by hand. Shots that featured Varlus and overlaid computer-generated prosthetics were the most difficult for the effects team, requiring careful match moving. Rather than using a still performer, Varlus performed the motion capture for the character himself. Scenes were blocked out and performed on set during principal photography, first with Varlus in the scene and then without. The shots were then replicated in the motion capture studio, with Varlus performance recorded by 8 cameras from different angles. In addition to the Mummy, the script called for numerous effect shots to magnify the sweeping adventure of the film. Vistas like a flashback shot of the ancient city of Thebes, combined location footage shot in the desert, and composed actors shot on green screen, model miniatures, matte paintings, and computer-generated effects. The plaques Imhotep unleashes were accomplished using practical-based computer graphics, with Industrial Light and Magic designers swapping out models of different qualities depending on how far from the camera the swarming insects were. While the film made extensive use of computer-generated imagery, many scenes, including ones with Rachel Weisz's character is covered with rats and locusts, were shot using live animals. Another close-up shot used footage of anesthesia anesthetized locust attached to a stunt performer, combined with extra computer generated pests. Sandstorms use procedural graphics based on programs used to create tornadoes in Twister, while the mashes of flesh-eating scarabs use techniques developed for Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. A shot of a firestorm engulfing Cairo combined real palm trees, physical models, and matte paintings with computer-generated hell, fire, and rubble. Pacific Title Mirage also enhanced shots with digital camera shake. The final involves an army of mummies coming to Imhotep's defense. Many of these mummies were created by makeup effects supervisor Nick Dunham, who produced makeup, prosthetics, and animatronic effects in the film. Each suit came with various variations for stunt performers or pyrotechnics. After principal photography, the suits were sent to Industrial Light and Magic to scan and be modeled in the computer, using parts of the Imhotep mummy to save time. Industrial Light and Magic recreated the underlining digitally to add into the scenes and use motion capture to animate them. The animators credited Fraser's ability to consistently react his movements in multiple takes as saving time when it came to match the motion capture digital mummies to the live action fight scenes. Whew. Finally, that's it for the development. I can breathe. Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to take a long gulp of water. Right, do apologise for anybody that doesn't like the sound of that. But that is everything for the development. A lot went into this movie. And as I mentioned, usually I would cut all this down and I would just do the footnotes, the most important bits. But I figured because it's the movie's 25-year anniversary and I love all the behind the scenes stuff, that I thought I'd just go into sort of the development, the casting, the filming, and special effects, especially special effects, because Industrial Light and Magic are like the standard of like special effects. They are one of the best out there in the business. And there are many times where I've watched this movie, and I will admit, and maybe again people disagree, but this movie doesn't age. It ages like fine wine. It gets better with age. The practical effects and the CGI effects you'd think for a movie from 1999 would look terrible, but I'll be honest with you, the mummy still looks good. He still looks fleshy. He still looks disgusting. The effects are not bad. They work perfectly. And that's just a sort of a testament to all of the animation studios that was working together, as well as you had Industrial Light and Magic, one of the best in the business. It's just incredible to me to go behind and to also find out a lot of the stuff that was used was developed for like things like Star Wars or Twister, so they were taking other movies from other things and was using it into this one. And I think that's why another reason why this movie has lasted so long is because it's aged so well in terms of story and characters and special effects, that it's a film that you could watch in 1999 and you could probably watch it in 2050 and it would still look good. I don't have the Blu-ray, but I've heard the Blu-ray is even better than version that I have. I've got the original sort of special edition 2-disc version from like the early 2000s. I've got them both on DVD for the first movie and second film. But I've heard like the special effects for the effects, shall we say, in the Blu-ray edition is just incredible. But I'd love to buy the Blu-ray edition, but it's incredibly expensive, so I haven't really bothered. But it's I'd love to get it when it comes down in price. But yeah, so much went into this film. So much, and so I wanted to go into detail for that. But that is all she wrote. That is everything that I have to say for the introduction for this movie. All that requires of me now is to go off and to watch this movie again. But you know what? It's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute joy. And I would watch this movie for free over and over again, all day, every day, constantly, because it's just that good of a film. So, without further ado, I'm going to go explore the mummy's tomb, take a breather, because that was a lot of talking. And when we come back, we'll review this absolutely epic movie. Right, so I've just finished watching The Mummy, and honestly, it was epic. It was incredible, wonderful, full of adventure, full of action. I absolutely love and adore it, but then again, are you really surprised of my sort of impressions from the introduction? I love this movie. It is always a go-to. It's always a movie that's on here in the UK. and I absolutely love and adore it. To be honest with you, and I don't mean this in the nostalgia sense of the word. I generally mean it, but they don't make movies like this anymore. They don't make them like they used to. And I'm not just saying that because it's nostalgia or the rose tinted glasses. Generally, movies when I was growing up feel different to movies now. And again, it's more than likely it's because cinema technology has gotten better, camera technology has gotten better. They can do a lot more with CGI and green screen and that thing that LucasArts, what they use, Lucas Film, they have that big sound screen set that they use for all the Star Wars stuff now. Um, Again, maybe it's that technology just improved, but it just feels like when you watch movies like this, or you watch movies from like the 90s and early 2000s, they just feel different. They just feel a lot more sort of cinemified, a lot more sort of action packed, and a lot more shot in such a way that it feels like a cinema movie. Where you watch a movie nowadays, it feels a lot more realistic. It feels a lot more real. And I tend to go back to the movie feel of it, to feel like a film, not to feel like real life. If I'm making sense there, because I had the thought yesterday. I was watching the Peter Jackson 2003 King Kong movie. I actually love that film. It's one of my favorites. It's a very long movie, but it's great. And I was watching that and I was thinking, yeah, they couldn't remake this nowadays. Like they could give it a go, um, but it just has that feel of what they were doing during the 50s and 60s of cinema when they were making these monster movies, when they was making these adventure films that they had to use the practical effects. They had to use what they could because they didn't have CGI and stuff like that. But it felt like an adventure then. And then when you rewatch like The Mummy now, or you rewatch The King Kong, you're like, yeah, they've got CGI, but it still feels like an adventure. It still feels like we're going on a journey. Um, and yeah, maybe it's the rose tinted glasses, but they just don't make movies like this anymore. They really, really don't, and you can feel that, and that's probably why this series, this trilogy, this movie is such a cult classic because it was done so well. The cast is so incredible. Everything about it was just so of its time, but still works today. This is like it's one of their movies. It's like Back to the Future. It's eternal. It's everlasting. It's always going to be good. And they should never reboot Back to the Future. They did try to reboot the Mummy franchise, and obviously Universal tried to do the whole um, monsters universe, which didn't get off the ground at all. They made like the Mummy, and they made Dracula Untold. I quite like Dracula Untold, to be honest. I know a lot of people don't, but they made Dracula Untold, and then the Mummy, and it just died. So that never went anywhere. But it, pushing that to one side, it just feels like even if they tried to remake this movie, have the same story, had the same characters, obviously different actors, and they tried to tell this story, I just don't think it would work. I think you would just be able to tell because how good cinema is nowadays that it just wouldn't feel like it did back then. And that again, it's not just a nostalgia, just by a technical standpoint. Technology has come leaps and bounds so much now that it would lose the feeling of authenticity of an adventure and it would feel too real. I hope I'm making sense. I hope people understand what it is I'm trying to say there. It's just the fact of things have gotten too advanced. And that to remake movies of the time then, nowadays, they lose their charm because they don't feel like they did. Because they can't, but unless you use the same technology they used to film those films back then, now. So that's basically what I'm trying to say. So definitely, when people say they don't make them like they used to, for this movie, that's what they mean. Is like it is iconic for the time, and you couldn't remake this movie now and it to still feel the same because it wouldn't at all. Um, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It also made me feel like a complete nerd because I watched this movie without subtitles. To be honest, I forgot to turn them on. I always assumed that they would be on because whenever I watch it in the past, the subtitles are always on. So when you have any Imhotep or you have SETI or any of the Egyptologists are speaking in ancient Egyptian, there's always subtitles, right? In the copy I watched, there was no subtitles, but I'm that much of a nerd and I'm that much of a fan. Um, of this movie, of this franchise, that I didn't need them. That I knew what the characters were saying because I'd watched the movies that many times. I knew what he was saying. I knew what was going on in the scene, and it kind of made me feel badass, really, because it made me feel like I understood ancient Egyptian. And for me, like, for watching it this time for the review, added an extra layer to the movie, added an extra layer to the adventure, to the whole concept of like I am along for the journey. I am an Egyptologist. I am deciphering ancient Egyptian. I'm listening to it, and I know what he's saying. I know he's saying what he's saying to Evelyn when he's saying like, "Come with me, and we'll be together for eternal." Even before Benny translates, who translates poorly, but even before he translates, I know what he's saying. Or when Evelyn is speaking ancient Egyptian, I know. It's one of those where I just feel part of the line of like, hey, look, here we go. I'm part of the adventure. This is great, wonderful. So I felt like a huge nerd, but I am. So there's no way to really explain it any more than that. It was just, oh, I've seen this movie too many times. It's never enough. You can never have enough of the Mummy. But yeah, first impressions coming into it, it's still incredible. It's still wonderful. And yeah, I can understand why this movie has stood the test of time and why it's a cult classic and why now on its 25th anniversary people are still excited about it and why it's coming back into cinemas, because I've never watched this in the cinemas. It came out in 1999. I was born in 98, so I would have never seen this in the cinemas. So I'm definitely going to watch this again in the cinema to get that experience on the widescreen surround sound. I've got to do it for myself, and you've got to do it as well. If you don't finish this review, but there's a cinema near you that has the Mummy being shown again, book your tickets, go watch it, experience it, just for that sort of just for the experience alone. But yeah, I can understand why this movie is such a cult classic and so widely loved by so many people, especially here in the UK. Like I said, it's one of them films that's always on the TV, no matter rain or shine, winter, summer, fall, no matter what time of the year, it will always be on the weekend on ITV2 or the BBC or one of the channels, or even like Film 4. It will always be on a channel sometime during the weekend or during the week, guaranteed. I promise you. So anyway, on to the story. So the story of this movie, basically to break it down, is the fact of you have the high priest Imhotep. He falls in love with Anck-su-namun. She belongs to Seti the First, and because he kills the king, basically, he then steals Anck-su-namun's body. They go to Hamunaptra. He tries to bring her back from the dead. Because he stole the Book of the Dead, he is given the Hamdai, which is a terrible curse that is only really bestowed the once because it's so bad. And then he has his tongue pulled out, he gets mummified, he gets eaten alive, buried, and then he's protected by the oh god, I'm blanking on the name. Ooh, yep, no, I've lost it. But he's protected by a group of people. Basically, it'll come back to me. The Magi. That's it. The Magi as protect this place so that nobody comes and wakes up the mummy, basically. And then we have Evelyn, who is an archaeologist, and that she wants to be more than what she is. She wants to be more than a librarian. She wants to be out on the field, but she keeps getting denied. You have her brother Jonathan, who is a pickpocket, who basically came to Egypt with his sister for the money, really, for the treasure, to find something worth money, really, so that he can make his fortune. Then we have O'Connell, who was in the French Foreign Legion. His whole platoon's wiped out. He's kind of down on his luck. Evelyn saves him from being hanged, as he's the only person who can get her to Hamunaptra. And basically the story goes from there, really. And what I love about this film, what I love about this story, is basically goes back to what I was saying about my first impressions, that they don't make them like they used to in terms of the adventures. When I use King Kong as an example, that movie is a very slow burn. It takes a long time before you even get to the island, before you even get to seeing King Kong, and then that whole adventure then goes from there. It's the same here. Before you even see the mummy, before any of that has happened, you have that slow burn of the true adventure of the adventure starting up. You you get the introduction to Imhotep and what happened to him. Then you get the introduction to your main cast of characters. Then from there, it's a bit of a slow burn of getting to Amenaptra, them getting to know each other, that sort of thing. You getting to know the characters, and then they read from the book. The mummy comes back to life, and then from there, it's more of a it's a bit of a race. Then, like, okay, we've all caught up with the story. All right, let's race on ahead to the mummy one by one taking out people, taking their skin, taking their eyes, taking their tongue, um, regenerating, and then them trying to find a way to defeat the creature and save the day and all that. And it's a true adventure story. Like, it's not all rushed in your face. It's none of it is done. Nothing's left out of place. Everything is. You have the setup, you have getting to know each other, you have the whole waking up the mummy, what all the mummy does to all the people that open the chest, and then we're off. And it's, from there, it's just a huge, long adventure, but you feel like you're part of the ride, and you never feel like this movie's going on too long, this movie's boring. Like, it's never that. It's like there's always something going on. And it adds back as well to the cast as well, the incredible cast that we have of, like, having somebody who's as talented and charismatic as Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell in the leading role, in the leading man role. Then you got Rachel Weisz as Evelyn, again incredibly talented. You've got her as well. Jonathan Hanna, who does a great comedic relief. You got Odie Faher as Ardette Bay, great, fantastic. Like, the whole cast is incredible. Even like Kevin J. O'Connor, who plays Benny. Again, comic relief when he's on screen. He's a bit of an asshole, but you know what? You love him. You think, yeah, I don't like him, but he's great. He's funny. I love it when he's on screen, just to see sort of what he says or what he does or what O'Connell does to him when he throws a chair at him. It always makes me giggle. I mean, how many times I've seen this movie. But this whole cast does a fantastic job to really bolster the story. Even Arnold Vosloo, who plays Imhotep, he doesn't talk at all, really, apart from ancient Egyptian. His whole presence, his whole on-screen performance is all visual. It's all body-based. It's all physical. So he has to be sort of an impending sort of force just by being him. With his eyes, he has to use his eyes. He has to use his body and that sort of thing. He's a very much like a chameleon, which is kind of ironic because I think he plays a chameleon in the G.I. Joe movie as well. But not saying that they're too interconnected, but the point I'm trying to make is the fact of you have an incredible cast that do a fantastic job, and you have Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep, who again doesn't speak any language at all apart from ancient Egyptian, and it all just fits into place, and it bolsters the story, and it also helps the cast as well. So overall, with the story, it's an adventure. And you fall in love with this cast, you fall in love with this crew. And, a lot of people have said to me when I've told them I'm watching this movie, they've all said to me, oh, this movie was my sexual awakening. This is how I knew that I love this, or I love that, or I was attracted to this. And I can completely understand because, like, me growing up, I had a huge crush on Rachel Weisz. I still do. Still have a huge crush on her. Again, Rick O'Connell, again, absolutely incredible, handsome bloke. I became a huge fan of him, and I went off and watched all of his movies that came before. And he does not disappoint. In any movie that he's done since, again, doesn't disappoint. He's always a joy whenever Brendan Fraser's on the screen, and I don't think anybody can disagree that. He just is. I still haven't seen The Whale, but I will get around to that soon. But yeah, this whole story and the cast is just perfect. Really, really well done, and I just absolutely love it. But that's all the things that I love. This section that I want to talk about now is not bad. It's not negative. It's just things that are like when you watch a movie multiple times, even if you still love it, each time you watch it, you still notice certain things. You'll pick up on things you didn't pick up before. And I've got 3 questions, right? 3 questions that have come up in my household all the time. Whenever me and my family watch this movie, these questions always come up. And I just wanted to share them because I know I can't get no answer because, again, the format of a podcast, I can just speak, but nobody else replies, really. So when I ask these questions, if you feel like you have an answer, please tweet me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. Or if you've got me on Discord, send me a Discord message. But these are the questions that come up in my family. And so I wanted to put them to you guys listening to see what you think, see what your opinion of these questions are. So, question number one: why did they do the Humdai to Imhotep, knowing full well what would happen to him if he was revived? Because think about it, right? So they knew that the Humdai, right? So, for anybody that doesn't know, if anybody has seen the movie, the Humdai is a curse by the ancient malediction created by the ancient high priest of Egypt as a punishment reserved for blasphemers. It is described as the worst of all ancient Egyptian curses, one so horrible it had never before been bestowed. The Hamdai was used by the ancient Egyptians only to punish the blasphemers committed to severe crimes, and so was used very rarely. If at all, although the curse was mentioned in any text, in any form of text, there were no written case of it ever actually being performed. This is because the Egyptians greatly feared it, and that the sole known cause of the Humdai ever being carried out was on that of High Priest Imhotep. He committed the crime of using the Book of the Dead to bring his lover, the Pharaoh Seti I's mistress, Anck-su-namun, from the dead. The Humdai was meant to be so potent of a curse that should any of its victims ever arise, with them would come forth the 10 plagues of Egypt, as God himself had set unto Egypt in biblical times. The victim would also be condemned to a cursed life that would not end, even in death, and although a person cursed with the Humdai might be physically dead, they were still capable of being brought back to life through an incantation from the Book of the Dead. Bound to the victim's existence was a chest that, should ever be opened, would leave those that opened it bound to the curse of the Humdai, as the original victim would seek out whoever was present when the chest was opened, so as to kill and assimilate their organs and fluids. By doing this, the original Humdai's victim would regenerate themselves to their original state of being, and no longer be undead, but a being with unspeakable power and immortality. Until the victim is fully regenerated, they will fear the presence of cats, who are the guardians of the underworld in Egyptian mythology. So, my question I put to you is the fact of knowing all what I've just said and knowing everything that the Egyptians knew about this curse, why would you put this curse on him? Why would you bother? Knowing full well that there is a possibility, even if that possibility was 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, there's still that 1% chance that somebody would come along and accidentally wake him up, and then he's then been bestowed with great power. Now, I get it. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't be a movie. There'd be no such thing as the Mummy. I get that, right? But it leaving that to one side, leaving the movie side to it, and just thinking about it logically, why would that make sense to put that on him, knowing that if he came back, there was no way to stop him? That you're screwed. That he comes back a god. He comes back. He has super strength. He's immortal. He has control over the sands of Egypt. He has the control of the dead. Being able to bring back his priests, mummified priests, being able to call on an army of dead soldiers to help protect him, defend him, or kill whoever he wants to be killed. Why would you give somebody like him this? You should have really just mummified him, cut his, take all his organs out, take his tongue out, take his eyes out, mummified him. Maybe if he was still alive, mummify him alive, let him be eaten by those carnivorous beetles, and then be done with him. That's it. Like, done. Why not just do that? Why put a curse on him, knowing full well that if he came back, which he in this movie he does, he's now overpowerful and there's no way to stop him, and that the Magi are like, well, there's nothing in this world to defeat him, unless you're like, okay, we have this curse, we need a counter curse. Okay, we bestow this curse on this sword, so that this is the only weapon that can defeat him. Again, I know, let's be honest with you, it is a movie. I'm thinking too deep into it, but these are the debates I have with my family all the time. Me and my dad had these discussions, and we tried to figure it out. And it adds another layer and a bit more fun to watching these films. It does my mum's head in, to be honest with you. But it's something that me and my dad do all the time. Is that we try to figure it out. Like, why would that make sense? Why would they do that? And I know you feel like, Luke, you're digging too deep into the movie, but I find it interesting. And this is probably where I get it from, is when I dig deep into films of like, Luke, it's not that deep. Don't go that deep. But I can't help it sometimes. But that's question one. Why would they do it in the first place, right? Question number two. If Imhotep took Mr. Burns' eyes, wouldn't he not be able to see without glasses? Because we all know, and it was set up in the movie multiple times, and it was referenced that Mr. Burns needed his glasses, otherwise he couldn't see. Um, and even had that moment where he's dropped my glasses and he's on the floor, and then Benny comes along, stands on his glasses. He's like, "Oh, I'm screwed," and then he's walking around blind, and then the camera turns all fuzzy and blurry, and he can't see anything. Right? This is not me making it up. This is in the movie. Right? He's walking around, can't see anything. Turns around, there's the monster, and the monster takes his eyes, takes his tongue. And before he can take his skin, obviously Rick comes in, shoots him, gone, runs away. Now, again, okay, you could say the mummy takes his eyes, and because the magic that the mummy has, he was able to correct the eyes. Okay, but he he still got to have a way of regenerating. These organs aren't his. So he'd have to regenerate the organ with the eyeball, so that it worked. And again, I know it wouldn't really make sense to have a mummy going, "Oh God, I took the eyes, but I had to have took the eyes of a blind man. Bloody hell!" And walking around blurring, is like, "Oh, where is everybody? Anux of the moon, are you there?" You know, like, I get it. It wouldn't make sense, but again, it's a fact of Mr. Burns needs glasses to see, so wouldn't Imhotep then need glasses to see? It wouldn't make sense, would it? And again, it wouldn't be very cool. I know the mummy walking around with Imhotep walking around with glasses, it wouldn't work. Or even just the mummy himself before he gets the skin walking around with glasses on, it wouldn't work. I know, but I just find it funny how he took the eyes of a blind man, and that wasn't funny. Or you didn't have it like they obviously. I know they played it to be serious because when you first see the mummy, it's played for seriousness, it's played for horror, but it still would have made me laugh if you just had a few sort of seconds of where like he gets the eyes and he's walking around like, "I can't see, I'm blind, what did I choose this guy for?" And then all of a sudden his vision comes back. He's like, oh God, thank God. That's just my comedic brain working. But I've always wondered, and that's another debate that me and my dad always have, is the fact of, hold on a second, if he takes the blind man's eyes, even if he's not fully blind, he's still partially blind without the glasses. Shouldn't Imhotep need glasses? Again, movie sense, it wouldn't make sense and it wouldn't be as cool. But it's just a funny sort of thing that was like, yeah, that makes sense. He took the partially blind man's eyes. He should be partially blind. But, there's neither here nor there. And then finally, this question is one that I put to my dad, and neither of us can have an answer because, there's no real answer. So, what if sort of the mummy returned, but in the future? And sort of the people that were there when the chest was opened were dead. So, what I mean by this question is the fact of, imagine me and a couple of my mates, 1912, we find Hamunaptra, we dig around, we find the chest, we open it, the sort of the sand goes all over us, and that's it. We are marked for death. Okay, that's how it works. That's the concept. Then we find the mummy's tomb. Okay, fine. We find the Book of the Dead, but we don't have the key. We never found the key. The key is lost, so we never had any way of opening the chest. Okay. So we take the photos, we go back to England, we pull it into the British Museum because that's where all the Egyptian stuff went, let's be honest with ourselves. And they're on display, the mummy's tomb's on display, the Book of the Dead and the Book of the Living are on display, all good, right? Years and years go by, I'm dead, I've died, all the people that are with me have also died, right? Then, say in 2024, some archaeologist finds the key, reads the inscriptions and goes, this must link to the Book of the Dead that's in the British Archive. Okay, so that guy goes down, British Archives, they go there, they open the Book of the Dead, and they start reading the insides. Like, for centuries, we never, not centuries, but for hundreds of years, we've never been able to read what is in this book. So finally, we can read it and we can learn more about, the Book of the Dead and about ancient Egyptian curses and lore and all that sort of stuff, right? They do it, mummy awakes, scary. And he's like, I have to go find the people that open the chest so I can regenerate myself. But everybody's dead. Then what? What happens then? If I'm dead, I'm a corpse. There's no skin left on me. There's no organs. All my eyes, my tongue, all my inner organs, they're gone, right? All my skin's gone. I am worse for wears as the mummy is, right? then what does he do? How does he regenerate? He's still immortal, yes, but he's got no, like, unless somebody reopens up the chest, which who's to say we after we opened it, we put the lid back on, we probably kept the lid off, or even if the lid was put back on, then he would need somebody else to come along and to reopen the chest, and not just one person, but a group of people, you know. And I know it sounds silly, but just again, it's one of them questions that I thought the fact of what would you do if the fact of you didn't have the key, but you opened the chest, the mummy was awakened, but the people that opened it were dead by the time that he awakened. Then what would he do? Again, there's no answer to it because nobody knows really. That's not really part of the story or the lore. But again, it's one of them questions that I always ponder to myself of like, whew, I wonder. But so yeah, those are the three questions I always ask myself and have debates with my family whenever we watch this movie. And I thought I'd share them with you all. Um, but yeah, my overall thoughts is this movie is fantastic. I absolutely love it. One thing that I love about this film as well is that they really sort of take their time to show the monster, to show the creature. And this is what I love about horror films in general, is the fact of some of the best horror movies are the ones that really take their time to introduce the bad guy, introduce the killer, introduce the monster. Because if you heighten that tension, if you heighten that feel of anticipation for what you're going to see, when the monster or creature, whatever it is finally revealed, it can be scary, or it can be impactful, it can be memorable. And it's the same for this, is the fact of we first see the mummy when they open up the sarcophagus. He's just a mummy. He's just juicy and disgusting. And then as Evelyn's reading, this camera pans back to the mummy, and he's just there stationary, and all of a sudden he's like that. He comes to life, which is terrifying. And then when Evelyn first meets the mummy's alive. It's disgusting, and he's there, and it's creepy, and it's scary, it's spooky. And then again, it's that same sort of impact of when Rick first sees the mummy, and when Jonathan and all the rest of the American crew, when they see the mummy, each one's like, oh, you know, it's that shock. And I like that they didn't show the mummy straight away. It's like they slowly built up to the mummy's reveal, and then it's very epic and very scary and horrifying, you know. So I love that. But yeah, overall, this movie is absolutely fantastic. It's perfect. I don't see anything wrong with it, even with all my questions of like, why did they do this or why did they do that? That's for me personally, they're not negatives. They're just me trying to find more fun out of something that I love. And I do it with a lot of movies. It's not just the Mummy. It's a lot of films that I have. I will try to go out my way of like, I've seen this movie multiple times. I'm noticing certain things that are that are not issues, but what if they did this or what if they did that, or you know, this sort of thing. And we do it with a lot of things. We do it with Harry Potter all the time. We've watched Harry Potter so many times that we do it with Harry Potter. We have so many questions about that. I did it when I watched Jack Frost. If you listen to my Jack Frost review, I had a lot of questions about that, about certain things. It's just one of them things that I think I'm not the only one that does this. I'm sure many people and many and in different families do it as well. Where you watch a film multiple times, you're like, oh, I wonder if what happens if they did this, or that doesn't make no sense. But again, to me, that just bolsters to the movie. That just makes the extra viewings more fun because you ask these questions, and even though you've asked these questions multiple times, it just adds to the fun of it. Um, but yeah, the whole story is incredible. The whole cast is incredible, and yeah, they just don't make them like they used to, which is a real shame because they generally try nowadays. They really do, but just because of all the technology and how it's improved and got so much better now, that it's really difficult to make movies like this nowadays and make them feel like they did. And I'm not saying that movies nowadays are not very good, not at all. There are some absolutely banger, incredible movies that come out nowadays, like Dune Part 1 and 2. Absolutely incredible. That feels real. And for somebody who loves Dune and has read all the books of Dune, what they were able to do with that, you wouldn't have been able to do in like 1999, early 2000s. The technology just wasn't there, but it is now. Um, but I feel like that's what makes these movies, you know, like King Kong and like The Mummy and these classic monster films, even like Van Helsing. I still say to this day that Van Helsing, with Hugh Jackman, I still say to this day that film has one of the best werewolf transformations in any movie. And I know we have an American Werewolf, which that has an incredible transformation, but generally, I love Ben Helsing, and I wish that movie succeeded. But again, it's one of them classic monster adventure sort of films from like the 40s, 50s, 60s of old cinema. Um, Taking those characters and really sort of bringing them to that real adventure side of it all. But again, you couldn't remake it nowadays because it just wouldn't be as good. It's just the way that the movies were shot and the technology for the time. It's just so much different to now that if you tried to redo it, it just wouldn't be the same. So yeah, 25 years of this incredible movie, and it isn't over. I've got The Mummy Returns, and then I've got the Dragon Emperor, which I kind of like that film. It's not as good as the first two, don't get me wrong, but it's not bad either. And that's not a word. I would happily have a fourth movie with this cast, bringing back Rachel Weisz, bringing back Ohana, bringing back Brendan Fraser, do another mummy movie. Recently, Brendan Fraser was asked would he come back for another mummy film, and he goes, "Yeah, if the script's there, I'll do it." He loved making those movies, even though he almost died making them. He loved doing them. So I'd love to see him come back to us. I just want to see Brendan Fraser come back as the leading man action hero again. He was from my childhood. He still is, and he's still got it. He's still handsome, and I'm sure he could still do a lot. Well, he probably won't be able to do the stunts as much because I think he's hurt his body that much over the years. Probably not do as much of the stunts himself. But even so, he's still got it. He's still got the acting chops. I generally feel like he still could do Rick O'Connor so fantastically, so great. But yeah, I actually love this movie. I really do. And if you haven't watched it, it's its 25th anniversary. It's going to be back in cinemas. Do yourself a favour. Go watch it in cinemas if you haven't watched it before. If you have watched it before, go watch it in the cinemas. Go experience it. If you've got the DVD, put the DVD on. If it's Blu-ray or standard, it doesn't matter. Watch this movie. Relive your childhood. Relive that nostalgia. And just experience it again. It's generally that good. So, before we wrap up, before we come to the end, the bit I really like doing, which is the trivia. There's a lot of trivia about this movie. Right. So, Brendan Fraser, as I mentioned, he nearly died during a scene where his character is hanged. Rachel Weisz remembered Fraser, stopped breathing and had to be resuscitated. If I remember correctly, I feel like Brendan... The trick was, whenever you see hanging scenes in movies, a lot of the times they've got a harness on around their body, and that harness is attached to a hook at the back of the neck, and that hook is attached to like a safety line. So whenever you see hangings in movies, they do drop, but the harness and the hook is what's really taking your weight. There's no weight on your neck at all. There's no weight on the rope. Obviously, for the cinema side of it, it looks like the rope is, but all your body weight is on your harness. So you'll go down still, but you won't be strangled. The problem is, I can't remember specifically, but if I remember correctly, there was a problem with the harness or something like that, and it didn't take the weight, and then a lot of the weight went into his neck, so he was basically being hanged. He was strangling, and luckily they were quickly being able to notice this. It was like, oh shit, he's not acting, he's actually sort of suffocating, and they quickly got in and saved him. But yeah, generally, he could have died on this movie, which would have been obviously really, really sad and tragic and incredible loss because Brendan Fraser is such a treasure. But yeah, it just shows small mistakes can happen. But he liked to do all his own stunts, and I think he still. Well, not nowadays, but he did for a very, very long time. He just did a lot of his own stunts because he liked to do them, and he was pretty good at them. And that's one thing that really improves this movie is the fact of when you see Rick O'Connell do something, you see Brendan Fraser. It's not a guy that kind of looks like Brendan Fraser. It is Brendan Fraser. You know what I mean? So to me, it really bolsters the fact of like, yeah, that is Rick O'Connell. He's a badass. You believe it's Rick O'Connell because it's Brendan Fraser. You know what I mean? In one scene, Benny is shown with a sack full of gold, which he's trying to load onto a camel. Benny pulls the camel by the reins, but the camel doesn't budge. The camels all, for some reason, hated Kevin J. O'Connor. Apparently on set, they really didn't like him, so That's a fun little bit of trivia. Brendan Fraser was cast due to the success of George of the Jungle. Stephen Summers also commented that he felt Fraser fit the Errol Flynn swashbuckling character he envisioned perfectly. The actor understood that his character, quote, doesn't take himself too seriously, otherwise the audience can't go on that journey with him, which I completely agree. With the exception of loincloths, a few pieces of jewelry, and uh, pastels, Patricia Vahez was nude except for body paint, which took 4 hours to apply. So that is the lady that plays an ox on the moon. The library disaster was done in one take. It would have taken an entire day to reshoot if a mistake had been made. The opening voiceover was originally intended to be read by Imhotep. Director Stephen Summers later realized that Imhotep wouldn't be able to speak English and gave the voiceover to Ardette Bay instead. The white nightgown Evelyn wore when the ship was attacked became transparent when it got wet and had to be digitally painted white during post-production so the film could keep its PG-13 rating, which I found that quite funny when I read that. I was like, yeah, I get it, but it's funny. The Medjai was originally supposed to be tattooed from head to toe, but Stephen Summers vetoed it because he thought Odette Fair was too good looking to be covered up, which I understand. I completely agree. Rachel Weisz is not a big fan of horror films, but did not see this film as such. And she said in an interview, it's Hokum, a comic book world. I kind of agree. It does feel like an adventure comic book. Not an action hero sort of comic book, but like adventure tales, like Tales to Astonish, that sort of thing. So I completely get where she's coming from there. And then finally, a cloak lent by the British costume rental company Angels and worn by an extra in this film was discovered to have in fact been made for Alec Guinness when he played Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope in 1977. So yeah, one of the cloaks, one of the extras, was actually used by Alec Guinness, Sir Alec Guinness, sorry, when he played Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I think is just absolutely incredible. Yeah, wow, that one surprised me, really did when I saw that bit of trivia. I was like, oh God, what are the odds, eh? But again, one iconic movie to another. Crossover. Star Wars and the Mummy. I'd like to see that crossover. I don't know if it would work very well. Lightsabers, even if you couldn't kill the Mummy, you could chop him up and kind of find a way while he's in bits and pieces to figure out how to defeat him. But yeah, that is all she wrote for trivia, and here we are at the end. So yeah, as I said, I absolutely love this movie. Happy 25th anniversary. I can't believe it's been that many years since this film came out. It makes me feel old. It really does, considering I'm 26, and this movie came out a year after I was born, and it's just been a staple of my life ever since. Watching it all the time on DVD, and it being shown practically every year, all year, non-stop. And it's one of them films that you never get bored of it. If you've watched it one time or you've watched it a million times like me, it's one of them films that is always going to be good because the cast and the story and the dialogue and everything about it is just perfect. It's a perfect movie. It's absolutely fantastic. It's gorgeous. The cinematography, the practical effects, the music, everything just transports you to ancient Egypt, and everything just transports you to, I think it was like 1922, I think this movie's set. But either way, it just transports you back in time and you feel like part of the adventure, really. I would love to go to Universal Studios. I don't know if it's still there, but I know that there's a Mummy ride in Universal Studios, and from the last I heard, it's still, even after all these years, it still gets loads of people still come to ride that ride every year. So I hope it's still there because I'd love to go to Universal and to ride the Mummy ride. Probably not. No, my luck. They probably brought it down, or by the time that I get to Universal Studios, it'll probably be not there. But a man can dream, a man can hope. If you have read the Mummy Ride, let me know again on Twitter or Discord or wherever you have me, because I'd love to know what people think or what the ride's like and that sort of thing, or even if it's still there, if there's still hope. But yeah, I am finally coming to an end. I've run out of steam. Just go watch this movie. Do yourself a favour. Go watch it. Celebrate the 25th anniversary. And then, yeah, we'll watch the second movie, The Mummy Returns, very soon. But until then, I've been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye.